Indie horror games have exploded online. Games like Inscription and Five Nights at Freddy's reinvent the loop with their bold innovations by mechanizing horror through gameplay. Many games rely on repetitive hide-and-seek chases to induce fear and distress, but some small gems break the mold with fresh new approaches. Released in April earlier this year, White Knuckle is a game that bills itself as a roguelite speed climber. The game's roguelite approach means that each time you play, the game is different. You'll unlock new items, levels, and more as you play more runs. It's a simple yet effective concept for a game that I was very enthusiastic about, and why I think White Knuckle sets itself apart from other indie horror games I've played so far this year. The game itself is easy to pick up yet brutal to master. Your understanding of the game's movement and gravity is crucial. You can grab ledges and other surfaces to move around the substructure, however your hands will turn red to indicate exhaustion from overuse. This controls your movement to prevent reckless jumping and is determined by how long you hold onto a surface. Both hands are exhausted separately, which gives you a unique way of managing stamina. Managing your inventory is also important because the number of items in your inventory affects how fast you can move and how high you can jump. These two concepts are some of the ways White Knuckle challenges your ability to climb. Once you start a run, we're immediately introduced to the game's setting, which is a tall ascending tower only known as the substructure that the player must escape. White Knuckle doesn't explain anything outright, but that's not to say there's nothing to see. The substructure is divided into 3 subregions that the player navigates, starting with the silos. The silos remind me a lot of Aperture Science. It's mostly gray with white walls that are falling apart, and there's a robotic intercom that gives out messages, and it stays on throughout the whole game.
You are en route to Habitation Yellow. Please enjoy your alert. Elevator security locks are still in place. Manual override will be required.
It's a cool environment that conveys that soulless, sterile feeling you get from laboratories. This area is what you'll mostly be familiar with since it's the starting region for each campaign run. Nothing else is revealed in great detail, but it's evidently clear that the player is placed here against their own will. The game starts you off with a starting piton and a rebar at the start of each run to make climbing easier. You can use these to create your own path upwards. White Knuckle gives you plenty of tools to help you in your run, which you'll especially need in later parts of the game as the game gets harder the further you go. Other tools that will help you on your adventure include your starting hammer, consumables that restore your stamina, throwable bricks, and other stuff. Cans of food and other consumables are especially helpful when you need to regain your stamina while climbing since you're able to use both hands separately. There are also rare items like upgraded versions of the rebar and the piton, and also adorable little slugs that you can find throughout the substructure. And the slugs are without a doubt one of the most overpowered items in the game. You can crush them in your hands briefly to grab any surface for just a few seconds. You could essentially speedrun an entire part of the substructure if you use it with other items. Sprawled across the substructure's surfaces are gold and silver cockroaches, which you can collect to buy items and create checkpoints. You're also able to unlock perks for free in each run that either gives you better attributes or supplementary items that'll help you. And there are high tier perks that can be purchased with cockroaches too. Your opportunities for obtaining these perks are limited, however, and so are your choices. You'll unlock more rooms, perks, and items permanently as you progress further into the substructure. It quickly becomes clear that you're on a time crunch once you start going, as a dark, mysterious mass will begin to rise beneath you. If you happen to fall into this mass, you will die. This is White Knuckle's way of pressuring the player to move quick, giving them little time to think. The speed of the mass will increase as you go further up, but for now it's easy to avoid. You'll spend most of your time in this game scaling the environment while avoiding the mass, coming up with quick routes to move further up. Once you reach the end of the silos, you'll reach the interlude, which serves as a sort of checkpoint where you can save, buy items, and pick a perk. After that, you hit the button and move on to the next region.
Severe elevator malfunction detected. Avoid elevators until further notice.
The next region is the Pipeworks. It's a large, dark, sewery section of the substructure, much more compact than the silos. And unfortunately, the mass is still chasing you. The Pipeworks are undoubtedly more dangerous with its inhabited bugs and has a much darker atmosphere than the silos. The change in appearance is clearly demonstrated by the change in color from monochromatic shades of white to tones of puke green. You will encounter creatures like gas bags and striders. These creatures are passive and do not maliciously target you. You can use them to your own advantage, however, by jumping on the gas bags to launch you upwards and jumping on striders as just another platform. Despite the thriving insect life, it only serves to emphasize the desolation of the substructure. Yet there are secret areas that show signs of previous climbers, with graffiti drawn on the walls and messages scribbled all over. The pipeworks can be threatening, but for the most part, it's the same routine with different obstacles and hazards. You just climb up, avoid the creatures, and stay above the mass.
Drone reconnaissance in Channel 9 indicates structural warping.
At the end of this section, you'll find an elevator, as well as some complementary items and a vending machine. You'll be lifted up and have to climb a few walls and flip some switches. The mass doesn't stop here, and as if you weren't already crunching time, by the time you hit the last switch...
Alert. Airlock seal is priming. You have 30 seconds to return to the emergency personnel lift. Have a good day.
You're forced to hurry back to the elevator, and it lifts you out of danger and into safety. For now.
Alert. Deep substructure emergency lock hatch holding. Pressure nominal.
You are now at the last region of the game, the Habitation. At this moment, the game intensifies the gravity of the situation. There are no apparent dangers at first glance. However, warnings about teeth all over the walls make it obvious that you're going to be facing a new danger. You're given a moment to stock up on items and perks before entering the service shaft, a long dark crevice with vents that you must climb through. This is the part of the game that truly stressed me out. From this point on, you're no longer being pursued by a massive liquid. You're being hunted by teeth. For the majority of the game, you were pursued by a slow-moving mass that didn't appear much of a threat if you were far ahead of it. However, Teeth is a humanoid creature that could appear out of nowhere and just begin hunting. It is honestly my personal highlight of the game. It just spawns out of nowhere without warning, and the music that plays when it starts hunting is undeniably terrifying and remarkably effective in disorienting you with stress and anxiety. The music itself was enough to get my blood pressure rising, but what's even more terrifying is how easily Teeth moves across the walls. Teeth can walk along the walls with no problem, and even if the player manages to outrun Teeth for just a single moment, it will rapidly close the distance by sliding along the surface. You can deter Teeth with flares or by throwing objects at it, which will cause it to flee momentarily, but for the most part, you're just being hunted by this thing. Teeth will continue hunting you until you reach the end of the service shaft.
Brake mechanism has been partially destroyed. Emergency. Brake mechanism integrity compromised. Emergency. Seismic event detected in service shaft C.
Which by then you'll finally have to climb the exterior one last time before entering the Delta Labs. You'll find yourself in a maze of vents where the game introduces one last threat, and you're warned not to let go when it grabs you. You are now being hunted by the vent thing, an entity that lurks within the vents and will attempt to grab and eviscerate you if you're pulled to its nesting area. Your only way of resisting its pull is by grabbing the nearest surface, but the vent thing will be deterred if you look at it, causing it to retract. I found this section of the game to be somewhat easier to go through than the service shaft, but the Delta Labs ventilation shaft is certainly more claustrophobic with barely any open areas. Once you emerge from the vents, you'll have to ascend a tall room with mysteriously floating debris. You will also come across sentry guns, which are basically sentry guns from Portal. The game throws one last hazard at you, a layer of lasers that slowly ascend upwards, similar to the mass from earlier. Getting around this area can be tricky with sentries all around, but by this point your character's loaded with perks and items, which makes this last obstacle feel triumphant. After you crawl through the section's vents at the top, you'll reach the game's final room. This room has a door that opens to a brightly lit space. Once you step into the light, the game ends. And that's White Knuckle. White Knuckle isn't really a game about its plot and story. Instead, it's a game about how the player can learn and overcome the game's mechanics to progress through its levels. The game is still pretty new, and it was only released in early access about a month ago, but it's already impressed me with how effective it is in turning stress into anxiety. Games often stand out when the parkour in the game is surprisingly fun. It's engaging and even relaxing to be able to scale your environment with freedom. In White Knuckle, however, that is very much not the case. As mentioned before, climbing in White Knuckle requires a balance of weight and stamina. Even though moving around in the game can be satisfying, abusing this function can be very harsh, especially if you run out of stamina at the wrong time. Since your chances of encountering this problem is solely relying on how well you climb, this approach for game balance is great. It doesn't just challenge you to control your stamina, it also encourages you to come up with creative ways to move up. You can use items to not only create grabbable handholds, but also perform some pretty impressive movement tech, such as something I like to call rebar jumping, which involves leveraging the force from tossing a rebar. Weight is also a key factor in how fast you run. With too much gear, you essentially become dead weight. White Knuckle relies heavily on gravity, so if your character becomes too heavy, you'll have a difficult time picking yourself up and jumping over gaps. Your character will move much more slowly if they have a lot of items in their inventory than if they have nothing. You will eventually have to choose whether to stock up on supplies or not, even if the game affords you plenty of chances to do so. Mobility is a critical factor in survivability in this game, so managing your inventory is just as important as managing your stamina. This is where White Knuckle's difficulty really shines. If you are lucky enough to build your character properly, you should be able to get around a lot of the game's obstacles and breeze through each level. However, the game can punish you in a matter of seconds, even if you feel overpowered at the moment. If you're not careful enough, you can still be quickly humbled by being targeted by multiple barnacles or by running out of stamina with no surface to land on below. White Knuckle's movement is as easy to be abused by you as it is to punish you. The game's atmosphere is impressive too. Each location feels completely different from each other, thanks to the unique soundscape for each level of the substructure.
Failure imminent. Structural integrity 50%. Proximity sensing. Reading beyond nearby.
The sterile feeling from the silos is punctuated by the repetitive industrial sounds that fill the void of silence.
Security systems compromised.
The squelching sound of insects echoing through the pipeworks is unsettling. These are ways the game masterfully uses sound to create a disturbing atmosphere. The high-pitched sound cues that alert you to imminent danger, such as the mask or teeth, spike your anxiety well above its threshold. Combined with the game's fast-paced movement, this creates an element of stress that I feel is unmatched by most indie horror games today. That is the true beauty of White Knuckle's horror. It isn't trying to directly scare you. Rather, it's aiming to stress you out to the point of collapsing. That's not something that hasn't been done before, but it's definitely one of White Knuckle's greatest strengths. Speaking of the environments, this game's setting is pretty damn cool. While it definitely has the industrial look most horror games have, the PS1 style graphics and details such as the chunky fog particles and dark contrasted lighting sells the look really well. Even at times when you are safe, the substructure does not feel welcoming. The environmental hazards like the crushers in the silos or the bursting pipes in the pipeworks makes the substructure feel hostile, as if the structure itself is trying to keep the player from escaping. There's a lot to observe around the environment that the player doesn't often get to see right away due to the game's oppressive time crunch, but if you were to take the time to look, there's a lot of secret areas that reward you with context clues and valuable items. The game will reward you greatly for taking the time to explore the substructure, despite the risks. The substructure will become much more complex with hazards and rooms added in as you unlock more content in each run. I haven't explored every little thing this game has to offer, but a lot of content is unlocked after just a few runs. There's also a secret Easter egg in the game that's quite elaborate, but talking about it would just spoil the fun. One of the most damning unlocks I've gotten in the game, however, has got to be the game's hard mode. It's unlocked once beating the game's campaign, and it seriously elevates the aforementioned stress that the game gives you. There's a number of changes in this mode that amps the difficulty up to 11, starting with the massive speed. In hard mode, the massive speed is doubled, meaning you're off to a hurry start. Not only that, but creatures are much more abundant than they were in the game's regular difficulty. Barnacles now target their tentacles directly at you rather than at random walls, and sentries immediately start appearing in the silos. I haven't found all the changes yet that this mode has because I haven't finished the game yet in this mode. It's really hard. This mode is the perfect demonstration of White Knuckle's cruel nature against the player. If you're not into increasing the difficulty, don't worry. The game offers endless modes for the whole substructure in each of its subregions. White Knuckle is a very rewarding replayable experience that many parkour fans will love. I really enjoyed playing it, and I hope to see it out of early access sometime soon. It offers a unique experience in the horror genre that doesn't require playing with friends. It's designed to be fun but challenging. And pretty much that's all I have to say in this video, but I may come back to this game in the future once it's out of early access, and I'll definitely keep up with it. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video as much as I enjoyed making it. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.